I'm trying something a little different in this installment of More Than Meds. In recent videos, I've linked psychotherapy with Aikido, a unique Japanese martial art with a non-violent philosophy of harmonizing energy between people. So I sat down with two advanced Aikido practitioners to talk about what Aikido and psychotherapy have in common. Richard Moon Sensei is a 6th degree black belt in Aikido. He's an Aikido instructor, a mediator, an author, and a musician, all in one, based here in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's also a fellow YouTuber with over 600 videos of himself, his sensei, Robert Nadeau Shihan, and other advanced Aikido practitioners on his channel Moon Sensei. I'll include a link in the description. He also just published a new book called Quantum Aikido, and I'll include a link to that too. Kenneth Kron Sensei is a 5th degree black belt in Aikido who accompanies Moon Sensei on international teaching workshops and seminars throughout the world. He helps manage the Moon Sensei YouTube channel, assisted us with this recording, and works in tech and, as he says, creative problem solving. And I'm Dr. Stephen Reidbord, a longtime psychiatrist and psychiatric educator, and for the past 25 years, a student of Aikido. And this is More Than Meds. Well, I was thinking a little bit about Aikido and of course psychotherapy, which is my interest, but also your improvisation with music and so forth. And I wondered if you had something in general to say about improvisation in life.
Well, I think that's probably a great place to start in the sense that I don't think most people think of it that way, but what else is it? Okay. Now, generally, people get into kind of a groove and they don't realize that they're doing some kind of act here. But it's like I say, most people are actors. They just usually play one role. But there really is much, much more available to us. And I think when I looked at the work that O-sensei was doing, it said, he was just saying, you know, it's infinite. You really can open this out to whatever. And so my sense is there's energy flowing through you. It has its own quality. And if you can harmonize with that quality of energy, your life will manifest in the way that what he called your bestowed mission, that completes your bestowed mission. And that I think most people are so cultured from the time they start. I mean, just being in the room of birth, the tension in the people's bodies around you starts to shape the way you, and then of course all the crap that they tell you about who you should be and how you should be. And of course a lot of it's not bad, but generally the way that it's set is in stone, as if this is all that there is. And I think most musicians learn to play a song, or they learn to play a piece, and the notes are written, and they do that, and they think of that as music. But what I would say is every composition was improvised.
That's right.
And that I think most people don't realize that we are creating it all the time. It's just usually we're working off a sheet music or a script that we have for ourselves of how we interpreted what everyone told us about how we're supposed to be. Because we are interconnected energetically, and we do feel and affect each other. And so the piece that's important, I think, is that Aikido offers so much, is as you tap into the center of your own energy, your music starts to come out. And then you can blend it in and become part of the symphony. I don't know if you ever heard the equation from O-sensei, 1 + 1 = 1. That what I would say is there's this energy that we think of as coming from within us, and then there's what we think of as the external, but actually it really is all one system. And that's what I think Aikido, you know, when you join with your uke and blend with their energy, you realize that the energy becomes one system and there's no forcing. If, in my opinion now, and I don't really know, but I believe that that's what Aikido means, is that you bring these two forces into one in a new direction. They create a new something. As I like to say, the Allegheny and the Monongahela make the Ohio River. And
Yeah, I like that one myself, actually.
and so what I think we're looking at is how do you stay true to the energy that is. Bob likes to use the word colors, or sometimes I like chemicals or whatever that make up who you are, blend in a way that they don't clash with the outer world, nor do they abandon their path to what everyone else says or thinks. So you don't want to force your trip on the uke, and you don't want them to force their trip on you. You want to join with them in a way that creates a harmonious, like two singers coming together in a good way. But it's not really a question of understanding. It's much more a question or a process of, I like the word feeling, which I call the most undervalued word in the English language. As you start to feel, it doesn't take away thought. It informs it in a much more universal way. So I think what happens for people is that they disconnect from themselves and they try to satisfy their external requests or the demands that the world puts on them. Or because the demands are put on in such an inharmonious way, they end up resisting the external world and they disconnect in that way. And so having that sense of it's okay to be who you are and it's okay to harmonize with the world. You still get to go wherever you want, but I think most of us, at least in this country, we agree to drive on the right side of the road. Doesn't matter. In England, obviously, they drive on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
But as long as you can come to some harmonious relationship with the world that you're in, you don't end up in these crashes with people all the time, clashing with ego against ego. And so that coming back into your original source, I think, is what Aikido offered us.
And feeling is so important. I mean, again, in my field, psychotherapy, so much of the move right now is thinking. It's, how to think differently. Tips, tools, and strategies is what I say sometimes about, how do I do this different? What do I do? What do I do? And it's not so much what you do, it's how you are and how you feel.
And what we're trying to get is back to this sense of feeling the aliveness that is you, as opposed to the ideas that you have about who you are or how you're supposed to be, both from your own and the external. But coming from this original source. So Sensei's famous quote, calm the spirit, return to the source. And then I like to add to that, because he had another quote that said, it's a great love. Omnipresent in all times and quarters of the universe. There is no enemy of love. There is no discord in love. Aikido is the realization of love. So I think when you're loving yourself, when you're loving your experience, when you're loving the world that you're in, and that doesn't mean that you like the way it's going. That doesn't mean that you like the headache, but that you love the fact that you're alive in the feeling, even though you're having a headache or you're having an argument with your partner or whatever your problems are at work or about work. There's still something that is your radiance and your glow that you bring that into the world. And then I think what we see on the mat is all of a sudden when you work that way with your partner's force, the conflict ceases to be an opposition and it becomes an unfolding. And then your life unfolds in a very natural way. But
so I've heard you say something about martial arts and Venusian arts. Maybe you want to lay that out for people here?
Well, I don't know that most people know or think about it. They just think martial arts is karate and judo and all that stuff. But the term martial arts comes from Mars, the god of war. And so it's anything that had to do with the warrior's path. And I think it's commonly a misunderstanding, and people think about fighting, and of course, the UFC and those kinds of things where people are combatants against each other to win the fight or something like that. But that what O-sensei said was that it's the art of the warrior is an art of peace. The reason that the warrior engages in the battle is not for the conflict and not so much for the winning, but to create peace. And so in this spirit of living to, rather than in hatred, rather than in destruction, but rather in more so in love, creativity, back to your term, improvisation, this creative unfolding of our lives. Like I say, in war, you fight against what you don't want. in peace, you work on what you do want. You create what you want to make happen. So Venus was the goddess of love. So when I say I don't really study Aikido as a martial art at this point, I did at one point, and I studied other martial arts, and I was into that aspect of it more. But as I began to understand more and more what the founder was teaching, I realized Aikido is the realization of love. So I say it's a Venusial art. It's learning how to, people who piss you off, if you could actually live in a place where you love them, which would you rather be, hating or loving? You're the one who's in the feeling. So how do you move from that, I hate it, to I love it? To me, that's Aikido. And yes, with a physical attack, it has to do with all our principles of moving off the line, blending, and all that. But really in life, it has to do with, what do you do when your partner nags at you or your boss is grumpy? Or how do you move in a way that you stay in this glowing space? Because the other piece that I think he was teaching us, and what I have come to believe in my years of consulting, high pressure business situations, and certainly I did some relational work with families and stuff like that, that if you can work that way with someone, it changes who they are. Mm-hmm. It's pretty obvious, I think, if you send back negative energy, it's going to escalate. Well, let's take it first from external interpersonal conflict. And what I like is that somebody comes in, whether it's into your office or at home, and they start, I hate what you did. And then the usual, like I say, the typical fighting mind is you block that and you counter with, well, I hate what you did, or it was right, or it was, and you, instead of going, well, why? What would you have liked me to have done? How do you think we should do this in the future? Rather than even talking about the past, let's design the future. Mm-hmm. If you're in that spirit of listening, my kind of riff on this one is, if someone comes in and you sincerely don't resist, don't add any negative energy, but sincerely try and listen and understand what they need and work with them to kind of find a solution. Pretty much you come in and you're really angry and I go, well, you should, whatever, it escalates. But as soon as I go, I didn't know you felt that way, or I'd like to understand what you're feeling, or help me get clear on what you want to see. Like I say, if you don't give back any negative, most people within a minute, their energy changes.
Takes two people to fight, right?
If they can stay angry for more than a minute, they're unusual. A couple minutes in, they're a black belt. 3 minutes in, they're, basically a master. And 5 minutes in, they're a world champion. But it only takes one, and all of a sudden the clock starts over.
The two of you are talking about internal and external, but with the implicit realization that that's just a perspective, right? I mean, the energy coming at me is because, the way you feel right now, you feel small, it feels big. It really is a realization that just kind of solidified for me in the moment. I don't know if that helps you. I don't know how you feel about it.
Well, it feels like an attack if you're in that frame of mind of being attacked. Maybe you mean something like that. A constructive criticism could, why are you talking to me that way?
No, that's really good. I mean, I have a older brother who is deals with some issues and stuff like that, brain damage from an automobile accident, and out of fear, he's angry and hostile frequently. He slips into it without realizing it. No. And I get so tired of it or when I'm tired or when I'm in the wrong place, almost anything he says feels like an attack to me. I assume it's going to be. I start with that mentality. And when I can remember the reverse, that this is my brother, he's struggling, he's operating out of fear, so of course, fear turns into aggression. And I go back to my extraordinary listening, then all of a sudden I don't take it on. And generally speaking, he's not very easy in those modes to help him out of it, but at least I don't escalate it, and often it moves it the right direction. But what you're saying is exactly right. It's so much the perception that we have, if we could see that almost no matter what somebody says, that what they're expressing is a frustrated desire, a frustrated need, a request on some level. And if we can get to the request, and then we can get to the actual need underneath the request and bring that back to the Aikido, you don't want to get that involved in the fist or the movement in that way, but the intention that's driving the movement of the physical, that's why we call it Aiki, not body key. Well, in a way, part of what your job is to provoke them.
Yeah, that's true.
To bring them to the places that they don't want to go. And of course, the first person they're going to see is you, and you're going to get it in that sense.
That's right.
But it's exactly the difficulty that they have in what was the Gestalt term, owning their feelings, in recognizing that this is coming out of me, and that's where the power lies. That I have the power to change how I feel more than anyone else. I don't want to say that the stuff people do doesn't have any effect. It does.
Right.
It's not completely your internal world, but your internal world has so much effect. And when you move where you are, when I move myself from the, oh my God, my brother's attacking me, to, oh yeah, I can see that he's frightened and aggressive. The world changes. And so we get off the line in Aikido. We move out of the way of the strike or the push or something. If we move out of the way of their emotional push or attack and work with them, and that's, I think, exactly what they pay you to do.
Yeah. You watch the
them.
energy, you step
Right.
off the line and, oh, look where it went. Yeah.
And help them see, where they're coming from. So then I think we can empower them to move to a different location in their own spirit. And as I say that, find yourself, know yourself, whatever, and the people going on spiritual journeys to Nepal or where the real spiritual journey is into your own experience. And so dealing with that issue that we call fear, I think is very essential to our work here. Fear turns into aggression. It's just, and yet, Sensei, there's a quote that I've heard. He said, I feel what you feel, that you call fear, but I call it a call to action. And Bob Nadeau, who I studied with, I think you have to some degree, said at one time, paraphrasing that in his words, he said, the fear is the harbinger of power. Once you recognize what was it before it was fear? It was energy moving in your system at a level you couldn't work with. It pushed you into that compass position where now you're, what do you call, externalizing or attacking.
Right. Yeah.
And once you learn that it's just energy, and Aikido teaches us more than anything else to work with our own energy. Well, Bob uses the term, rush of energy. I guess we've all heard that.
Right.
You get a rush of energy. Now, if you can open and let that energy flow, it usually will move you back to our improvisation or to a better place or to what you want. If you tighten down on it, then it turns into all those cascading emotional events, fear, aggression, and then, anger. And we're into relationships where we can't talk to somebody who used to be our lover or what, and it's really kind of a shame because, as he said, it's really in the beginning, the first stage, it was about martial arts, but then he got into this second stage where I think it was very much about creating a one world family. He says it's not about winning or felling an opponent, it's about reconciling the world and making human beings one family.
Yeah. As I think I said to you in an email recently, if we really could incorporate Aikido principles and the spirit, the sense of it in our society, I don't know how much we'd need the physical martial art, because we'd have the Venusian art instead. We wouldn't come to blows, really.
You're right on my hot spot these days. What I'm saying is that Aikido is in chrysalis. And Bob always said, Sensei really wasn't interested in creating martial artists. He was a martial artist. So the lineage that he came out of, the way he showed it, was through martial arts. But he was interested in saying, do you see what I'm doing in the martial arts? You could do that in therapy. You could do that in architecture. You could do that in music. You could do that in relationships. we're a lot of us. I think, and I'm more and more as I look out, I thought it was a few of us. I'm starting to see it's a lot of us recognize it really isn't a martial art. And I use Venusial rather than Venusian, but I don't care.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That the idea that what we're trying to create is a more loving environment, that we'd like to live in a more loving environment. And so how do we do that? Do we really need to throw each other on the ground? Because I don't think most people like getting thrown on the ground. And I don't think, I did, and some of us do. We like the physical side of it. But a lot of people don't. And at this stage in my life, I don't. Right. And so I think it needs some kind of physical feedback process.
Yeah, I actually, Kenneth's still with us here. I remember once in a meeting, you said something about it should be taught in kindergarten or first grade or something like that. And it really struck me because I've thought that too. And of course, we're not talking about having 6-year-olds throw each other on the ground. We're talking about, I don't know, push hands or some kind of demonstration of what it means to cooperate with each other. And for, the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, if that makes sense. How to present that to a world that is so adversarial and so violent, right?
Yeah. So I'll tell you a quick story. I was at the dentist, and she gave me a little Novocaine, and I felt myself a little involuntary. I don't know how far I moved, not a lot. She's actually very gentle, and then I went, inside like, oh great, I'm getting tense so that I won't feel as much pain. Why don't you just relax? Probably even help. And she noticed. She said, "Oh wow, that was good." Mm-hmm. And so she asked me to design a relaxation practice for her other patients.
Great.
Yeah. So
adults and children.
Yeah.
I find that to be true in dentist chairs too. I think that's probably a great setting to talk about this. And they use the Novocaine, and actually they use a little acupressure and some other things, at least at my dentist's office. But the idea of it's worse if you're tense, and it's much better if you're not.
And so that practice of recognizing that, why are you tensing up? Because you're resisting the energy that's flowing through your system. How do you learn to do that? And so I want to say that I think that 1% of the people in the world might study martial arts, maybe 5, certainly not 10. Mm-hmm. And of those, small fraction is Aikido. And of the Aikidoists, most of them are just doing techniques. They don't really see the inner aspect of the art, although, like I said, I think that's growing dramatically now. Mm-hmm. But so the principles really have very little to do with the wrist twisting and the throwing and all of the martial side of it. Has much more to do with kind of harmonizing with your own energy, learning how to bring yourself into a positive spirit. There's so much access to changing your state of being and living in a more harmonious way. And what I'd say is, when you're in harmony, you get a parking ticket, and it's a parking ticket. When you're out of harmony, you get a parking ticket, and it's, right.
I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Let me know in the comments. Please like this video, but only if you really like it. And please subscribe if you have not already. This video is part of a playlist I'm doing on Aikido and psychotherapy, and here's a link to the playlist. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.